Welcome to Bitter Reality Brewing. Today we've got something special planned. Don't forget, like, subscribe. Thank you again for sharing, and thank you again for all the support we've had. I'm gonna do something a little different. Instead of, and yeah, I know you probably heard that before here because we like to do something different. Got my mad scientist hat on, should we say, and looking to do a little experimentation. Everybody's trying these Kveik yeasts, and some, oh my God, that's really good. Some it's okay, and they really are very versatile, especially since you can ferment at a normal ale temperature and get lager-like quality. And then you can ferment at incredibly high temperatures, which, as we're approaching winter here in the US, might not be quite as easy, but I think my fermenter can handle it. Doesn't get that cold, but it definitely gets very warm if I want it to be. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna brew. Yes, and this is one of my pet peeves. I always say, buy the equipment that you're going to be using. So don't buy like a 6.5 gallon anvil if you're gonna be doing 5 gallon batches. Well, I got a 10.5 gallon anvil that's designed to do 5 gallon batches, and today we're doing a 7.5 gallon batch. Is that do as I tell you, not as I do? But it's a one-off, it's something a little different. And yes, it holds 10.5 gallons max capacity, and guess how much water we need? 10.5 gallons. So it'll be fun. I think I figured it out, and we'll just increase our sparge water by 2 gallons. We're gonna do 15 pounds of grain. I've just kept it very simple. And the reason I kept this very simple is today's brew day is all about Kveik yeast. We're going to take 7.5 gallons and we're gonna chop it into half-gallon batches at the end, and we're gonna split them into 1 gallon carboys or 1 gallon jugs, whatever you wanna call them. And we're gonna pitch 15 different Kveik yeasts. Yes, 15 different Kveik yeasts. I'll try to list them somehow on the video, but I'll give you a quick rundown. We're gonna use Imperial A44, which is actually a blend of 3. They don't really tell you what they are. There's some suggestions, some hints out there, but definitely a very pineapple forward yeast. I've tried it, but we wanna compare them all. Voss from Omega, Horninal from Omega, and then the rest are all from Too Far North Brewing Company, which is Ebbegarden, Juggernaut, Lida, Wollsaeter, excuse me if I jack up the names, doing the best I can here. One of my jokes is English is my second language, and sadly it's my only language, so. Vol, Framgarden Kveik, Laradal, Gosmel, Tormodgarden, Bust, which I'm dying to try that one. I think that would be great for a stout, but we're gonna be doing a pale ale today. And Ravines. So if I jacked up the names and you wanna put some sort of pronunciation down in the comments, go for it. All the better. I try to pronounce things the best I can, or at least close to where they need to be. So that way you at least understand what I'm talking about. But I'm also looking to get a couple volunteers, should I say, local. My oldest son and maybe one of his good friends to come over and do the taste testing when we finally finish. So this will be the first part of a 2-part video. I have 15 pounds of pale ale too. I have 1/4 pound of Crystal Caramel L60, just to give it a hint of color and a little more, to it. But I really didn't want to put anything in the beer that was going to change the aroma or flavor. So we're gonna do Magnum hops. I believe it was 1¼ ounces of Magnum at the 90-minute. And let it go, and there will be no hop additions towards the end, just enough to bitter it out. So I'm really calling it a pale ale, kind of loosely, because there's gonna be no American hops at the end or any kind of hopping or hop aroma or dry hopping or anything to that level. We really want the yeast to shine. We want to smell any kind of esters. We want to get the aromas, the flavors. We want to get everything out of that beer primarily from the yeast. Now, of course, I'm using 2-row and not Pilsner, and I'm using a little caramel because I want to make sure it's drinkable and we like it. I don't want just this water with some yeast added to it, you know what I'm saying? So, got the anvil, got our jaded brewing. Let's get brewing. Okay. We're at mash, which 152 is where I'm looking. I don't crank it way up for people who haven't seen videos from me before because it doesn't seem to drop much, and when it does drop, it doesn't. Usually goes the other direction and goes up, not down. Okay, that's the brewing salts. Going for a light and hoppy beer, which just means a little bitter. There we go. Here's our problem. The problem is we got 7 gallons of water in here. We can go up to 8.5, but you gotta remember I'm putting 15 pounds of grain in here, which is gonna displace that water. So I'm gonna leave it where it is right now at 7 gallons. We're gonna put the grain in, mash in, get everything good, and I'll see how much more water I can add. If I can add more, I can heat it up to 152 and drop it in. It's not a big deal. So right now we're sitting at 3.5 gallons that we need to get in here, which I'm gonna put at least 2.5 gallons in the sparge, so I'm okay with that. Kitty's stalking whatever bugs she can find. I'm not really worried about anything, but I did put the small adapter in here because, hey, I'd rather get a little bit more out of the grains. So go ahead and lower that in there. Apologize for the mowing. Everybody around town was mowing yesterday, and I guess that neighbor didn't get the message. Drop our rice hulls in there, which should not be needed. Add another 1/2 gallon to it, and probably get away with another 1/4 if I really wanted to. There we go, we're gonna turn the pump on. And like I've said before, I find it easier to clamp it almost all the way down and then back it off a little. And it's pretty much perfect. And of course, when I start restricting it, the pump gets a little grumpy, but it's okay. Okay, we're going to do this for 75 minutes, and we'll kick it up to 168 for 10 minutes and be done. And go on to the boil. Okay, so I screwed up a little bit. This has been going for 90 instead of 75, an extra 15 minutes. I had to clean all the 1 gallon containers that we're gonna be using for fermenting, so it took a little time. I'm gonna crank it up. Go ahead and put the power back to 100%. Get the temp up there a little faster. We're good on the 168, and we're gonna see if we can do this without burning myself since I didn't bring gloves out here. Things where you know better, but you wanted to risk it a little. Heating up the sparge water. Let's take a bit anyways. Get this locked in place on the first try and keep it there. Let's see, you're trying to lift up on its own for some reason. Oh, frick, don't fall. Okay, that is crazy heavy. I was able to get another 1/2 gallon of water in there. So we're looking at 2.5 gallons of sparge water. Might be a little too much, but we'll see. I would say we had a stuck sparge, but we really didn't. It's just the water level was so high. And it's draining really quick, as you can hear it. Okay, we'll let that drain and let the sparge water get up to temp. Time to sparge. And this has been sitting on a propane burner, so yeah, I brought the rubber silicone, and it's heavy. Good old Pyrex. You brew beer, you should probably own some Pyrex, or something pretty close to it. Once we get this a little lighter, we can pick the pot up and just dump it. So I spilt a little bit of the water, not a big deal. We're gonna let that continue dripping, and once it's done, temperature should be getting up around 200 something. We'll pull it off and get ready for the boil. Okay, so we're sitting maybe a 1/4 gallon below the 8.5 gallon mark. You can hear the water still dripping into the pot. Had to set that over there. We were starting to get under the bottom of the actual grain pipe, which would be a problem, or grain basket, however you want to refer to it. I'm watching this very carefully because of so much liquid being in there, we start boiling, we could easily get a boil over. And I'll slowly put that in there as I can. But we'll see. As long as the beer comes out decent, we're okay. It's all about the yeast, at least for this test. Let's probably grab the hops before we get into a boil. Okay, we're at 201. It's our Magnum hops, 1 1/4 ounces of Magnum. Magnum hops still smells great. It's a nice citrus and floral aromas, but when used early in a boil for bittering, it's very clean, and a lot of hop growers point that out. So we're going with clean. We don't want any additional aromas or flavors really in the beer. We want to let the yeast shine, or not shine, based on which way it decides to go, but that's all good. We're at 202. We got our 200-degree warning telling us be careful, don't get a boil over. I came outside to weigh the hops because I was afraid I was gonna have a boil over, so I'm all over this right now. Okay, we're at 2:0. Well, we were at 2:09 2 seconds ago. Now we're at 2:10. So we're at a boil. I'm gonna go ahead and count the 90-minute countdown and drop the hops on in. We are sitting just a hair over 8.5 gallons. I still have close to a gallon in there, so based on our boil off rate, I'm hoping that I can add that here shortly and not have a boil over and boil off enough that we end up with exactly, or as close as possible to 7.5 gallons, which is what we need for 15 half-gallon yeast batches, brews, whatever you want to call them, almost like kind of large or small based on your brewing. We got 90 minutes and we'll resume. No more hop additions. That's it. Don't forget too, which I just did off camera, probably need to do it again, is if you have an all-in-one electric, rub the bottom, make sure you're not getting anything stuck to the bottom. Don't use anything rough like steel wool or hard scouring pads or anything like that on the bottom. You're just gonna put grooves and channels which will allow more stuff to stick, and it'll make, basically it's a vicious cycle. It just makes it worse and harder to clean. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to watch this for a little bit. The hops are kind of helping it foam up a little. Okay, sorry, the neighbors are pressure washing. We're sitting at close to about 8 gallons at boiling. If I multiply that for density, a thermal density, I guess they call that, I should be 0.95, which puts us at about 7.6 gallons. So I'm gonna drop this in here. We got about 10 minutes. I'm gonna drop in the yeast nutrient. And I crushed up the Whifflock tablet, if you say it that way. That's kind of funny. It's getting hot and the cold water inside the jaded brewing Scylla is shooting out from the heat. It's pushing it out. Okay, I'm sorry. I think this guy's gonna pressure wash till the cows come home. He's been doing it for hours now, so I'm not sure how long it takes to pressure wash a house, concrete, and some other stuff. But we'll rock on. We're gonna start dropping the temperature. I'm gonna kill it now. There we go. I'm gonna kick on our Scylla from Jaded Brewing, let that chill kick in. And we'll go from there. Remember, we're gonna be pitching Kveik yeast, so it really doesn't have to be that cool. I'm not too worried. And for those who haven't seen it, I know the noise is a bit ridiculous, but I'm gonna pump the water way, yes, this is where all the pepper plants need to go back, which I'm waiting to get some worm castings and some soil just to move things back into bigger pots. But I have a giant elephant ear plant over there. These things grow pretty much wild around here, and they grow out of control. If you give them the right kind of soil and a lot of water, they're huge, and the leaves are literally probably bigger than some elephants' ears. So hence the name, I guess. And of course, my pitcher plant has grown out of control, which is awesome. I was afraid it was gonna die, but it is doing just fine. Gonna have to chop that up into different sections so I have multiple pitcher plants for next year to catch all the lovely bugs. And yeah, you can see another elephant ear behind that. Okay, we're already at 154 and dropping like a rock in a good way. Okay, we're about ready to dump this in there. By the time we get ready to pitch the yeast and we've moved it from 1 carboy to the 1 gallons, it'll be down around 85, so it'll be fine. I have decided I am going to use a little bit of White Labs Clarity Firm, just see what happens. This is for 5 gallons, and when you pitch your yeast, which I'm getting ready to pitch my yeast technically, this is 7.5 gallons, so it may or may not do as well, but it has no odor. I just tried it, but it's very clear. Hopefully it's not too warm for it. Just curious. Okay, we're good enough. I'm gonna move it on over here. Carboy out with the spigot, and that way it'll be a little easier to move it to the 1 gallons. Put this on there, maybe pump it through there, I don't know. Okay, and if you didn't know what that is, that's called Subrock 3D. Came out in the 80s, it came after the tank game, which I can't think of off the top of my head. It wasn't really 3D, but it looked 3D with the goggles and everything that you put your head in. I was actually good at that game, kept the high score from my area, but you know, it's kind of funny because nowadays you play a video game, an 8-year-old comes up and just leaves you wasted and don't even get a chance to fight back. So yes, did I mention I also did a lot of 1 gallons, a lot of 1 gallon experimenting from smashes and everything before I got into the 5 gallons. So I have 15 1-gallon carboys, all filled with about 33 ounces. Reason, we were shooting for 7.5 gallons, we ended up at 7 3/4 gallons, and we were at about an 80% efficiency, which means if we boiled down that extra quarter, we'd actually be over 80%, which was pretty awesome. I did use the small batch adapter on the anvil, that definitely helps. We had a problem with the yeast that I mentioned we were going to use, and 2 of them just didn't look viable. So I'm using Norwegian Farmhouse yeast supposedly instead for 2 of them. So 13 are Kveik yeast, 2 of them are Farmhouse yeasts, which I substituted Stranda and Simonatus in place of the Raftevold and Arset because they just didn't look viable and I wasn't going to waste my time with it. So also, if you're into Kveik yeast or you're trying to learn about Kveik yeast and you got questions, if you haven't checked it out on Facebook, there's a group. It's all about Kveik yeast. It's all it's about, nothing else. And if you group, like I mentioned a Farmhouse one time, they'll make sure you're aware and you can go research and figure out what the differences are. But I asked a bunch of the people in that same group as I'm in, and the general census was 90 Fahrenheit would be a little bit better than 85, which is where I was going to ferment it at. So I've set my fermenter between about 85, 87 maybe, but 85 is where it's sitting right now, 86 somewhere, as an ambient temperature so that all of these will be between 88, 89 plus or minus a degree. So we're pushing them as close as we can or right at the 90 Fahrenheit, as I expect a few might even surpass that. The reason is we want to get all that flavor, all that aroma that yeast produces at warmer temperatures without, of course, jeopardizing one of the yeasts in the batch. And at the same time, you know, we don't want to put them all at 68 Fahrenheit and go, oh, they all taste like a lager. I kept it clean, but still a little bit of body. So it's a all two row, like I mentioned, 4 ounces of caramel 60 and Magnum, which was only at 90 minutes, and it was 1.25 ounces, just enough to give it a nice clean bittering to balance it out. But this is going to take a couple weeks to ferment. When it's done fermenting, we'll get a gravity reading so we can tell you exactly what the ABV is of each one. And this is a SodaStream bottle, and if you haven't seen one of my earlier videos when I was still kind of getting the hang of that whole Premiere and YouTube, what we're going to do is we're going to carbonate using these. So we'll bottle them, chill them overnight, get them nice and cold, then carbonate them on the spot and taste test them. Probably going to do something like bread or crackers in between, and each 5, because I mean 15 back to back, even if it's small, is quite a bit to taste test. So I'm looking to get some guests here. My son is definitely one, and then I believe one of his friends will be accompanying him. So that way we can get a little bit more of a panel of decisions and choices on what we think we like and don't like and why, and what we taste and what we don't taste. So thanks again for joining us here at Bitter Reality Brewing. Don't forget, like, subscribe. Thank you again for sharing, and thank you for all the support. Thank you.